Okay, we'll just go anyway. Okay, call to order. Okay, Pledge of Allegiance. Tom, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, roll call. Madam Secretary?
Pioneer Town, Steve Bardwell. Yucca Valley, Tom Ziegert. Landers, Dawn Johnson. Joshua Tree, Mark Lundquist.
Here.
Flamingo Heights is vacant. Desert Heights, Pat Flanagan. Wonder Valley, Teresa Seitz. She's absent, excused. Morongo Valley, Gail Swarrett. Copper Mountain Mesa, Mary Helen Tuttle. Here.
Thank you. Okay, D, adoption of agenda. Do I hear a motion? All those in favor? Okay. F, call for public comment. Our first, approval of June 11th, 2018 minutes, sorry. Hear a motion?
Motion. Second.
All those in favor? No discussion? Okay, we got, now we can go to call for public comment. Ed Vallerand. Ed, is that on? Is the green light on? Take it out of the holder and hold, it's easier.
No one ever said he was a technician.
Thank you.
My name's Ed Veller, and I own property from Copper Mountain Basin to Wonder Valley. I want to make people aware of a whole bunch of issues relative to this fire tax. I've got handouts. I was an engineering manager. Contracts was reported to me. I have pulled contracts. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I am upset on that I don't think is right. When Howard came around, he said 4 years ago there was a $42 million surplus. Now they're $29 million in the hole. Why wasn't there a 5-year planning given to the county supervisors like the water departments and the cities must do? They have an auditable 5-year plan showing that they can make their responsibilities. They have taken a number of cities and set up contracts. They took their 2014-2015 contract and superseded it with one in 2014 to 26, superseded it with one in 2015, and they raised the salaries up to 15% on some firemen. They were grossly overpaid. If you look at the public pay, go to San Bernardino County, for the top 100 paid people in the county, 25 of them are firemen. The Sheriff's Department only has 12. You know, we are being gouged, and they want us out here in the desert to pay $157 to a partial so that they can take the money and spend it down there. You know, for the people in Wonder Valley, that equates to 661 packages of top ramen noodles, which for some of those people is a meal. For some of the other people that have absolutely no tax, it's 779 packages of meals that they want us to give up for money that's going down the hill. When they took over 29 Palms, they told us they're going to put a $5 million station in. That's never happened. Now they're promising to Yucca Valley that they're going to put 2 new stations in. You know, they have a really bad track record, and I'll pass these handouts, and it's got the links where you can go on the internet to check the stuff I'm talking about, to verify from yourself. We all must protest, and the best way to do it after losing a protest on 29 Palms is if each community got together, you brought the protest into the community, and they check off so that you can have a group speaking to other people, and then you take the whole boxes down, stuff doesn't get lost in the mail. There was some disconnects we had with, thank you.
You can stay there, Ed. Al Marquez, you've got 3 minutes. Do you want to give up your allotment? You would? Okay. Ed, you got another 3 minutes.
Thank you. In 29 Palms, there were people that spent hours and hours helping me get signatures, and when I paid to get a list of all the people that had signed, theirs was missing. I don't know if it got lost in the mail, but there was a disconnect. That's why I'm saying get together as a communities and bring the whole boxes of your complaints down there at the hearing meeting so that there is no disconnect on the numbers. You know, Chamberlain, when we're fighting in 29 Palms, said never has the county been able to, never has the 218 been defeated. There has been never a success. I think we all need to band together and make sure there is a success to look out for ourselves. And after my time, I'll pass these out. You know, please take it home and read it. On the back side is excerpts from the contracts showing how much they made, and for the subsequent 3 years, they're getting between 4.25% and 4.5% pay raises on top of the massive pay raises, which drove up the retirement cost by over 10% for the liability of the CalPERS. You know, they are totally mismanaging the money, and I question if there's some commingling or conversion of funds from county funds being used to support cities so that they don't get lawsuited by not supporting at the effort that they have in their contracts. That's not an accusation, it's just a question going through my mind. I think this needs to be looked at, I think it needs to be fought. And I thank you for your consideration, and I'll pass these out. I've got an illness, so you probably won't see a whole heck of a lot of me after this. But, you know, I really would, I believe it's in the best interest of the whole community. And I see the 1 minute up, so like I say, please take the time to read it and contact people. At the Mesa, there were people from New York, Coppermount Mesa, people from New York that took some of this back, and they've got some landholder friends that they are going to complain. You know, it's going to be a very hard thing because it is landowners, not just the voters. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Gail Austin.
Is this on? Thank you. Gail Austin, Joshua Tree residents. In our next election, you will be asked to fill 2 positions on the board for Joshua Basin Water District. I want to encourage you to vote for the 2 incumbents, Rebecca Unger and Tom Floan. These 2 had the courage to vote to raise the rates to save the district's infrastructure, knowing that their stance would not be popular with the voters. Having the impeccability to vote for the community rather than their personal political careers shows how much they care about this water district. I also believe that they deserve a chance to see the plans that they voted on come to fruition. I know there's other people on the ballot and they're worthy of being board members, but I would urge you very strongly this time to vote for the 2 incumbents, Rebecca Unger and Tom Floan. Thank you.
Your comment. Celeste Doyle.
And before I begin, can I make a question of clarification? Will there be a public comment section regarding the plan presentation? I mean, not just a give and take and they'll enter the stuff on the questionnaires, but will we be able to say something at the podium?
No, the
Okay.
meeting will be adjourned after your comments.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just want to make clear. I have 2 things to say then. One thing is I want to say thank you very much to the Public Works Department. Apparently they found money to build a bike path on Sunburst from the old elementary school to the new elementary school. Somebody in Public Works got grant money for that. And I want to say thank you, and it's a very excellent thing. We're very happy to have that. Tim Kelly's bicycle might be in the way. I've talked with Jim Reed, who donated the bike. He and I will probably move it so it's not in the way, and then hopefully be able to move it back so it's somewhere in proximity. So if it's gone, that's probably what happened to it, that Jim and I took it for safekeeping and we'll put it back. The other thing I just want to say about the county plan, if we're going to have an unenforceable document included in the countywide plan, on behalf of Joshua Tree, I would much rather see our existing community plan stay in place rather than the unrealistic action plan that is being proposed tonight. And also, if the county expects the chamber to do anything on that to-do list, they need to restore funding. Those TOT revenues were dedicated to the chamber. They were supposed to be going there for local benefit from the community that generated it. And I think that money should be restored if the county expects anything in this thing to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Isabel De La Cruz? Did I pronounce that right?
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel. I am with an organization called Reach Out Yucca Valley. We are working with Joshua Tree residents. I just want to make everyone aware of this project. Very exciting. We work with Joshua Tree residents as well as 29 Palms residents, and we are starting community gardens in the area. We're hoping to start one here. It would go behind the tennis courts. We are waiting to hear back from the county about the MOU that has been pending since about April. So if you are interested in getting involved, we would love all of the residents to be involved and get their say in what they would like in the garden. The 29 Palms one, we are still looking for land, so if anyone has any leads on that, we're also looking for that. The goal of the gardens is to expand availability, affordability and quality of fresh fruits and vegetables. As this is a food desert, a lot of people don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, so that is the purpose. The project came out of some surveys that we did in the area to determine if residents do have that access, and it was found that we don't. So the residents that were present at the forum voted for the community garden projects to move through, and so we're just trying to get those going and get more fresh fruits and vegetables to the community. I'm going to leave this packet. I didn't know that I should have brought so many. Is that okay that I leave these with you to review? And if anyone wants to come see me, I have flyers for our monthly meetings. We'd love to see all of you there. And I can tell you a little bit more about the survey findings or any of that information you might want. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. That concludes comments. We are adjourned. The what? Oh, did you put something on here? Okay, I take back that adjournment then. It was supposed to be the white form. I don't know. Oh, Jane Jarlsberg.
Two items. The first one is kind of an announcement. I am now the official representative to the County Senior Affairs Commission that meets in San Bernardino. I represent the local Morongo Basin Regional Council on Aging, and we are meeting once a month at the Yucca Valley Senior Center, and we're changing our meeting time to 12:30 on the fourth Thursday of the month to meet after the lunch that serve there in Yucca Valley. So I want to invite everybody to come. What we do is discuss issues around seniors and their needs and things that we can do to change. And also we bring in informational speakers. So anyway, I'm inviting anybody, anybody of any age, but the legal age is 60 or over. I'm Jane Jarlsberg. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Okay, did anybody else fill out a blue card? Okay, I guess we are adjourned now. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll turn it over to planning. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Is this on? Can you hear me? My name's Terry Rahal. I'm the Director of Land Use Services at the county. And we're here tonight to have a presentation and an open house with you on the countywide plan. So I want to thank the MAC for making this time available because it's a time when we knew we'd bring out the community. So we're glad to dovetail after the MAC meeting and spend some time with you. This is our second round of regional workshops on the countywide plan. The last set of workshops we had was in October of 2017. So since that time, we've been doing a lot of work on the county's policy plan, which is a big component of the countywide plan, and have done additional work on the community action guides, including one for Joshua Tree. So the main component of our presentation tonight is going to be a presentation. We're going to have slides and walk you through an overview of the countywide plan and the materials that are available for you to review online. If anybody has already visited the website and had any problems, we have a demo station in the back corner there where we can show you how to navigate the website, especially some of the map exhibits that we have and some of the tools that are coming out in the countywide plan. So we'd be happy to work with you at that station to get you more up to speed and familiar with the material that we have out available.
Can you give us the website address?
Yes, it's countywideplan.com. Easy to remember. We've got some takeaway materials here tonight too that will have that on it. One thing I'd like to cover with you a little bit is you'll see a lot of boards throughout the room, and some of them are land use maps that we introduced somewhat last fall. We've made a few revisions. They're pretty limited, but please feel free to take a look at that and see if it's what you expected from the last round of meetings. Anybody that if you have any questions, grab anybody on the county team or our consultants. We've all got some kind of a name tag on, so feel free to bring your questions to any of us. Like I said, we're going to be starting right now with the presentation, and when it's finished, there will be plenty of time to browse and look at materials and talk to us. Also, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make on a comment card for us to address before you leave, please fill them out. And we'll be looking through them during the presentation. Whenever you want to turn them in, you know, it could be 10 people have the same question. So we'd like to cover those before you go and get them addressed. Okay? And if that works for you, I'd like to turn it over now to Colin Drucker. He's an associate principal with PlaceWorks, which is the county's consultant on the countywide plan.
Test. All right. Thank you, Terry. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because there's a lot to cover, but I want to orient everyone on this and then get to the question cards as soon as possible. As Terry said, right now, if you have a comment, fill out one of these blue cards, and if in the back there, if every consultant or county staff person can raise their hand, and you know Terry already, but basically anybody with a name tag on, you can give this to them, or you can raise your hand, and we're going to have some hawks out here looking for hands raised, and they'll get it, and then they'll look it over, and then they'll start asking me the questions. Otherwise, you can fill out those white comment cards, drop them in the box. You can fill these out and still drop them in the box. Just because they're blue doesn't mean we won't look at it after this presentation. And then anytime you can email. We've gotten a fair number of comments online and through email. So today's presentation, I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the countywide plan. Not everybody lives and breathes this stuff like we've been doing. A bit of a recap to date. Yes?
Sorry for interrupting. Would you mind scooting over a little bit? You're blocking the camera.
Oh, my apologies.
I think maybe that way.
Does that work? Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go over some highlights of the policy plan, and then a brief update on the community planning efforts, and then talk about what's going to happen next, and then we'll read those cards. So the countywide plan is this long-term planning tool that county governments use for both land use, development, services, and it really has two roles. So there's the unincorporated areas, and that's what the county's current 2007 general plan covers. It's just the unincorporated areas. What the county wanted to do is expand the policy direction to cover those services and facilities that are provided to everyone in the county. So whether or not you're in a city, an incorporated town, or an unincorporated community, there are issues and services that you receive, but there's no policy direction. It's one of the only ones in the country that will do that. So as I said, that's what the policy plan is, that long-term policy document. But there are three other components of the countywide plan. There's the business plan, which looks at governance, finances, communication, how the county communicates with people, how it makes decisions, and then how are we actually progressing towards our goals, rather than just leaving the document up on a shelf and wondering how we do in another 10 years, tracking that more on an annual or more frequently. And then we're expecting a release of that sometime around early 2019. And then the Regional Issues Forum is something where there's so much data, there's so much information, and it doesn't just apply to the unincorporated area. And one of the big pushes the county wanted to do was to help the county work more cohesively, and not having cities competing against cities, or cities competing against the unincorporated area, so to kind of move together more cohesive manner. And to do that, it's providing that information that everybody can use to make decisions, but using the same pieces of information and good information. And then that community planning continuum, which a lot of people have been familiar, that's been kind of the tip of the spear on the effort in terms of the outreach efforts. And so that is, we've expanded it beyond the current community plans and looked at adding tools for the communities to make improvements driven by what people have told us they want. So the other thing that we're trying to do here is make the information easier to get. And one of the ways we want to do that is put it on the web. And no, it's not just a website like you're used to visiting. Right now, the 2007 general plan is a series of documents that if you want to access, you have to go to a website and download it, or somebody's printed it for you and you can get it. We're looking to maintain that same type of access, so we'll still have a hard copy of the policy plan. But what we want to do is not just put the policy plan online, but add some search functionality, because there's a lot of policies that if you don't know, let's say, that you should be also looking in the land use element about fire safety, and you just go to the safety section, you might miss it. So instead, we want to try and introduce some search terms that are pre-filled, like fire safety, and then it will tell you all of the policies throughout the policy plan that are relevant, and all of the maps and the tables. So that functionality, you're not going to see it there yet. We have a beta site up there just so you can see the policies, but we wanted to get the content out in front of you first to make sure we got that part right before we went into website development. And one of the biggest helps on a county this size with this many communities and this many different regions is putting a lot of the maps up online and making them web-based. Now, we've had the land use map up online for a long time. That's kind of the easiest thing for people to look at. It's the most important thing driving the EIR and other analysis. We've just today put all of the other policy maps that you've seen in PDF form. If you've gone to the website when we launched that a couple of weeks ago, you'll see those in web-based format. And so we have, as Terry said, there's a demonstration site there. After the presentation and questions are over, we'll turn this one into a little demo area, and we can walk you through how you can use those pages. So, it's been a few years, but we have reached out to over 70 communities through various community level, regional meetings, EIR meeting. We've gotten some really good response. People are passionate about their community. We've gotten a lot of substantive input, whether it's through the website, reactions to the newsletters, press releases, social media, or any of the surveys that we submitted. And when I say we've gotten input, we have gotten, and just to let you know, we don't count PlaceWorks' use of the site, the county's use of the site, so these are all non-county, non-PlaceWorks individuals here. So we've had 13,000 people visit the site individually throughout the course of the project so far. And a lot of them have been viewing the community plan pages. You can see 15,000 views just on the community planning pages there. But we've gotten a lot of exposure that way. And then we talked, you're not supposed to be able to read anything on the screen here. Just know that we talked throughout the entire spectrum of organizations that live and serve the county of San Bernardino, whether it's the county organization itself, which most general plans just take place between land use and public works. We've looked at everyone. We were talking to child protective, child and preschool services. We were talking to economic development, everybody. All of the incorporated cities and towns and the various regional, state, and federal organizations. And then, obviously, everybody else as well, whether they're residents, students, property owners, business owners. And as a result, we have a board over in the back there. Also, everything you see as a board is available online on countywideplan.com/open house. So you can go there. You can also, if there's a big landing page on countywideplan.com, just click, here's what's new, and you'll get a link to it. But this board shows the results of a lot of the input that people gave us, which is we're not looking to grow in most areas of the county. We're looking to keep land use the same or reduce the intensity, whether it be housing or non-residential employment growth. Unincorporated areas are not areas where retail really, in general, should be going. We shouldn't be trying to put shopping malls in unincorporated. We should be putting a lot of this in the cities. And so as a result, there's some focused areas where people either wanted growth, very limited, and in the valley region, it makes more sense. But in the mountain and two desert regions, it really, except in a couple of focused areas, didn't make sense to put that growth. But what you'll see is we considered the growth of the entire county as well as just the unincorporated areas. Of course, the county government doesn't have jurisdiction over the incorporated land use, but we still wanted to be aware of it. So there were three main types of changes. The biggest difference from what you might have seen if you were back at the meetings back in October is we took the big massive color block of green that was resource conservation, and we put it into two categories, either resource land management or open space. So open space is the biggest change you'll see, and that's to reflect things like the Mojave National Preserve, the Pioneer Town Mountains Preserve, things like that where it's obviously preserved for open space, so let's not confuse it with something else. And then looking at infrastructure, we looked at infrastructure across the entire unincorporated county and saw whether or not there's water access, whether or not there's wastewater treatment, or whether or not the septic issue was, there's some areas where there's restrictions or bans on septic. And if you're going to use septic and well, it's only so dense of a development you can have. You're pretty much looking at half-acre or larger development. So some of the areas where it was multiple residential development in areas where they had no wastewater treatment, it would have to be miles of pipe for water. We said, no, that doesn't make sense. So we de-intensified some of these areas. And then there were property owners who said, I don't want this intensity, or I bought this land, I now want it to be open space. So it's mostly property owner input, agency input, and then community input on what they want to see. So if you go online, you'll see that there is a web map like this, and the hatched areas are areas where you'll see there is a proposed change. If you click on any of those areas, and you can zoom all the way in and even see the parcels, then you'll be able to see what the current land use district is and what the proposed land use category is. And you can see that any information for any area, whether or not it has hatching or not. So one thing that we did is we introduced what's called a two-map system. So right now the county has land use districts that are zoning and general plan. So general plans sit on top of zoning and provide this long-term direction, and they guide what happens in zoning. And the county had a one-map system where everything was zoning and general plan. It resulted in maps where it was automatically at a zoning level. And when you're looking at the entire county, you're talking about maps that really can't be displayed in color. You have to zoom in really far and read just a bunch of text or symbols or patterns. And it just doesn't make sense to have that fine-grained zoning have that long-term plan. So we introduced a second system of land use categories. That's the policy plan land use categories. We have a legend over there. We have this, what we call a story map, that's also available. And what it does is it walks you through exactly what is allowed in each category. And then it highlights, you can see kind of in the bottom right, it highlights as you go on and down the page exactly where that land use category is. But just to emphasize, zoning's not going away. We're just putting general plan on top of it so that instead of 5 flavors of commercial, it's easier to understand the long-term use is commercial. What type of commercial? That direction is provided in zoning. Instead of 5 types of rural living, there's 1 type, because that's what you really want to understand at a 20,000 foot level. If you want to get down to the parcel, that's when zoning comes into play. And then we also have 2 how-to videos on how to use web maps. So if you, for some reason, forget every single thing I've said up here tonight, you can go to the website and you can watch these videos, and you can start it and stop it however many times you want, and it walks through exactly how to use the features of the web maps. So the county also generated 35 action guides for the various community planning areas. Some areas are communities, just singular communities, some are collections of communities. So, and this will become our second major round of review with the communities. So, with that, I'm going to go into the policy plan. So this is the first time we're really coming back to you with a policy plan. Before, we were asking people what they wanted to see, what they wanted to change. And so there were 4 types of changes. So one was to streamline it, and I'll go over that in a second. And then there were other new state laws that have taken effect since the last time the update occurred. And then that idea of expanding the policy direction onto those regional services. And then what I'm going to do tonight is just walk through those really important shifts in policy or expansions of existing policy. It would take me probably, when we tried this with some staff, 4 to 8 hours to go through every policy and really explain it. And nobody wants to stay here. Well, some people probably do. We have to be out of here by 8:30, that's all I know. So, streamlining. Right now, the current general plan has 404 goals. So what we try to do was not to just throw things out, but to try and see how we could cover the same topics and even more with fewer goals. And there were 1,704 policies. So we managed to consolidate this, managed to eliminate a fair amount of redundancy. There were some consistency issues. Just when you're looking at 14 existing community plans and a county-wide policy document, you're going to get some consistency or redundancy issues. And so there are also goals and policies that we thought, well, it's sitting over here in this community plan. That seems like it really applies to the entire region or multiple communities. So let's try and expand it. So we managed to provide 2 more elements in terms of topics, but streamline it so that if you are someone, let's say you're you or you're serving in the capacity of a decision maker, or any number of these stakeholders here, and it's a little small, so I'll read it. The residents and businesses, county staff themselves, as they process the applications, agencies and service providers, investors and builders. And if you want county staff, or you want to read the entire 2007 general plan, it's going to take you days. And that's not an exaggeration, and that's not, well, you take a break every now and then. It'll take you days to get through it all. And we want people to be able to read everything so we don't miss anything, we don't overlook anything. And so right now, we've reduced that down to pretty much less than a day. And that's if you really read everything. But the idea is that once we get that search function in there, that not just staff, but everybody will be able to search this thing in minutes and find all the information that would have taken hours to find, even if you're just looking at a subsection of the plan. And I think more importantly, you're going to be able to find things that help support your argument, to help guide decisions in ways that you couldn't before. That because it's somewhere in the rest of the document that you have no interest or ability to review because you don't have time, now you're going to be able to find it. So the next section is new state laws. So there are a number of laws that were triggered by this update effort itself. And then there are laws that were triggered beforehand, and the county has already been compliant with it. We are just formally recognizing it here. So this first one on flood and groundwater maps, this law was passed to require jurisdictions in their general plans to have additional consideration for flood risks and stormwater management throughout the land use element, the safety element, the conservation sections. So to not just look at the standard FEMA maps, but to expand that analysis and not just flood risk, but stormwater management. And this PowerPoint, this presentation is available on there, so, and I'm not going to read the captions, but these are all areas in the county. So the other one, complete streets. So it requires jurisdictions to plan, and the important part is reflective of the local context, so it's not a one-size-fit-all approach, a multimodal transportation network. And what multimodal means is a system of roads, sidewalks, and pathways that allow people of all abilities to travel. Now, not to travel everywhere. They don't have to have ferry pathways or sidewalks everywhere. It's just enabling people to get around the community in a logical way that conforms with the context of the community. Then there is a mouthful one, a sustainable community strategy. And this is really more of a requirement for the metropolitan planning organization known as SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments. They have to look at land use, housing, the environment, and other environmental plans, consolidate them to try and progress towards a more sustainable future. And so what this means for the county and its residents is how can we comply with this law but not disrupt the quality of life and the future vision of people in unincorporated communities. So what we took from this was that's why you see the growth plan the way it is, of concentrating growth into communities that want it, communities in the valley especially, and allowing the other areas to remain lower intensity. Wildfire assessment, obviously fairly relevant every year for the county. And this just had a kind of a heightened requirement to address the risk of fire in state responsibility areas and very high fire hazard severity zones. And then also look at policies to reduce the risk. Now you would think, wait, the safety element doesn't already do that? It does to a degree, but some of these laws just sharpen the point a little bit more or require a little bit more state oversight. And then, so CEQA traffic thresholds. I think this group is pretty familiar with CEQA, but the California Environmental Quality Act is the state law that requires projects of certain types to be analyzed for their potential environmental impacts. Right now, the county and all jurisdictions use more of a congestion measurement approach. So level of service, how many cars can fit on a roadway before you have too much delay. And the state said, well, we need to move away from that because all that does is require projects to build bigger roads. And so we don't want bigger roads. What we want is people closer to jobs and housing together, we want people to be able to take transit, and so they said what we want is to reduce the number of vehicles that people, the number of miles that people must drive every day in their vehicle. And so how do you get to there? Well, you concentrate growth in certain areas, or you put jobs closer to housing. Most of the jobs in the county of San Bernardino are in incorporated jurisdictions, so that means not adding a ton of housing into the unincorporated areas. So the county's looking at this. The deadline's not actually till 2020, but the county's still trying to set the standards right, because this won't just guide the countywide plans analysis, it'll guide all future projects. And then there was a Senate bill passed a long time ago, Senate Bill 18, that talked about tribal consultation. This beefs it up and expands the number and the types of projects that have to be considered. There is a smaller presence of tribes in San Bernardino County compared to Riverside County, but there's still a substantial presence, still a substantial requirement to coordinate, especially out in the unincorporated areas. And then the two newest laws, the first one is climate adaptation and resiliency. So the easiest way to understand this one, because it is a fairly lengthy bill, is it requires expanded goals and strategies to protect vulnerable populations, public facilities, essential services, and communities from extreme weather conditions. So again, safety element already looks at flood hazards, fire hazards, things like that. But what do you do if those conditions are going to get worse or more frequent? And so what we did was, you'll see goals and policies that just strengthen the current safety element to address some of the issues raised here. And then the other new law was about environmental justice. And so we have a PDF map and a web map that will show the areas where there are unique or compounded health risks based on, there's a tool that the state puts out called CalEnviroScreen, and it looks at exposure to pollution and exposure to pollution and the socioeconomics of areas, and it combines them, and then it ranks everybody across the state and says who is the most disadvantaged. And it takes the upper quartile, the top 25%, and says, okay, these are your disadvantaged communities. Now, the term disadvantaged communities is used 2 other times in state law, and so it's very confusing. So that's why you'll see us refer to them as environmental justice focus areas, because the law for general plans is very specific on disadvantaged communities in this manner, looking at CalEnviroScreen. There's one in the water code and one in another part of the code. So we have these environmental justice focus areas where the county needs to look at policies and goals to reduce exposure to pollution and increase both opportunities for civil engagement, so people don't find out about things too late, and also to prioritize improvements and programs in these areas. And the state is on the 3rd version of CalEnviroScreen, so these areas can move around. But right now, these are what they're set on. All right, there are 2 major expansions, and the first is on health and wellness. Now, some general plans will cover health and wellness in some degree or another, but no county and definitely no incorporated jurisdiction, a city or an incorporated town, addresses health and wellness from the county regional services perspective. And so we worked with all of the various, whether it's physical health, mental behavioral health, and others, to understand what are their goals. A lot of their goals are already set by the federal or state government. What are their goals? How can we dovetail them with the county's goals? And how can we help them and the county get more funding to help and make progress towards health and wellness goals? And the other one was on law and justice. Right now, the general plan just looks at policing services for unincorporated areas. But the county also provides courts, probation, jails, a lot of law and justice services. And we didn't want to try and we're not going to tell them how to run the jails. But what we are going to do is introduce and propose some policies about how to help crime prevention, whether it's the county or the community involved, how to increase equity and capacity to serve, how to get potentially support for more judges to help clear the court cases, and then looking at rehabilitation and reentry and not just punishment. And then the last part are, important shifts in policies or expansion of current policies. And so there's 7 major categories here, and I'll go through them one by one. So land use, the biggest change there, although there are policies, you'll find them in the economic development element, that talk about fiscal sustainability. It's not as detailed or specific as we think it needs to be, and we really want to make sure that future development does not place a burden on existing populations. And it doesn't generate a reduction in levels of service. We want to make sure with the county, they're either having a budget for the regional services or the municipal services. And the county does run a balanced budget, but it is not overflowing in money. And it actually borrows from one or the other in order to provide the adequate levels of service. And so we needed to make sure future development was fiscally sustainable. And then the other big part of that was on land use compatibility and context-sensitive development. So there's already a fair amount of this. Obviously, in the existing community plans, we took those and tried to consolidate them because that was where we saw a lot of overlap and a lot of policies that were really good in one community, and we thought this is great for the entire region. And so we have some really strong policies about making sure that future use is compatible with not just existing land use, but planned land use and the natural environment. And then also making sure that things are appropriate for the context in which they are going to be proposed. So you might be compatible, but are you appropriate for the context? We also significantly expanded the military focus and coordinated with them a great deal and looked at how can we have policies that help safeguard the execution of the military mission. I believe the county, I might be exaggerating this, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate, is I think the largest federal military land holdings in the nation are in San Bernardino County. And all you have to do is look at the various bases, and that'll be fairly clear. It's, you look at maps and you kind of get a little desensitized to how big the county is sometimes, and we wanted to make sure we avoided encroachment issues. Again, we're a little fortunate that a lot of the military bases aren't necessarily close to a lot of inhabited areas, 29 Palms being an obvious exception. So we wanted to work with them to understand how can we help prevent and avoid encroachment issues. So areas where you might have, let's say, drone activity, or somebody wants to put a house or a cell tower, and that's going to interfere with the military's training operations. And we also wanted to make sure, though, that not only is it important that civilian uses are compatible with the military, but the military pays attention to what's going on in the civilian world, and it doesn't expand its exposure or its impacts on the civilian area. Water supply, not a small issue. We wanted to reinforce, and this is one where it's more expanding and strengthening the need for a clean and resilient water supply, even in cases of prolonged drought. While the county does not necessarily have the regulatory power over water, it can still have policies that help support it. And then really encouraging and requiring people be connected to either a public water system or a county-approved well. Again, make sure it's sustainable, even in prolonged droughts, emergency situations, health and safety issues. And then transportation issues. This is mostly a large issue in the valley in terms of the truck traffic. But what I think is most notable here is having those context-sensitive roadway improvements. So not necessarily requiring a new place to build sidewalks, and then you reach the end of the sidewalk and all you're looking at is the nice mountains, and you say, well, why is somebody requiring a sidewalk here? We want to make sure that the roadway improvements make sense for the context. And then those regional and local truck routes, making sure that we work together to get truck traffic through in a way that minimizes the impact on residential neighborhoods while still making sure that routing is efficient. Natural resources. This was one where we really refined the county's focus based on a fiscal analysis and looking at maintaining and improving existing regional parks, not trying to go out and build new ones and letting the others degrade, but focusing on improving and maintaining those that you have, and a commitment to improving and developing, along with other incorporated jurisdictions, the Santa Ana River Trail. And the flip side of this is that the policies also focus on community funding of local parks, trails, and recreation. So this is a departure from existing policy where it it kind of implies that the county is going to be able to provide parks and trails for everyone. And financially, that is not feasible. So instead, we look at how to help communities, and the county can be there with, in certain cases, if there's grant money, and others to help fund local improvements. But not just to build, because that's one cost and that's very easy, but the ongoing maintenance so you don't just end up with a dilapidated trail or improvement. And then on natural resources, this is one where we're really expanding the analysis and the policy focused to look at what's called landscape scale planning and conservation. So not just looking at a parcel and saying, is this parcel a good place for biological resources? It's expanding your view and looking at, well, how does this parcel play a role in the context? How does that sub-regional area play a role in the whole county? Making sure that you take the entire area into consideration. And then protecting that land with viable mineral and agricultural resources. So and that, in a lot of the county, especially for mineral rights, is going to help make sure there are buffers around communities, existing communities, and that the urban development doesn't spread too far. Renewable energy, although this is not part of the countywide plan update, this element was adopted in 2017 and has obviously been undergoing constant discussion. And there is a pending revision from Planning Commission to limit the location of utility-scale renewable energy systems. So when whatever change is made, gets made, we will fold it into the rest of the policy plan. And then on natural hazards, we have a lot of hazardous areas, whether they be flood areas, wildfire areas, seismic conditions. And what we wanted to do was strengthen the policies to reduce to the degree possible the risk for people, property, and the public costs that come with salvaging those areas, saving people, saving property, and reduce the amount of development potential that goes into these hazard areas. And so here, there, obviously the results of a wildfire, and here you see sometimes what happens after a wildfire is you have no more vegetation, and then the rains come, and then the earth falls away. And then the last part is, these are really the county's regional roles. Right now, the county does have an economic development element, but really focuses on those municipal roles, which are pretty minor in scale compared to the regional role that the county provides. So it's either on something like workforce training, whether it's the individual or whether or not it's the employer. And then there's also opportunities for countywide business and employment growth. And so the county doesn't have to say, well, we're going to try and push you into an unincorporated area. It says, where's the area that makes the most sense and is in San Bernardino County, so we attract that investment. And what you see up there is a concept called Hub City Center. It's a public-private partnership between Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, this is a county facility, California University of Science and Medicine, and then the idea is to offer housing and even manufacturing facilities for health equipment, and providing the skills and training to fill that critical healthcare shortage that is occurring throughout the county. So how does the county help position, whether it's the property, whether or not it's attracting the employers, all of that goes into how the county provides countywide economic development services. And so we have some policy direction on that. So a real quick update on the community planning. Some of this many of you will already know, but that community planning continuum that I talked about before, so that is at multiple scales. There's the county's role, and that's in the county policy plan, and there will be an implementation plan that will be coming out about steps the county needs to take. And then there is on the other side of the spectrum is what the community can do, and that's one of the main reasons the action guides were generated, is for a list of potential things that the communities can do. And it's not a honey-do list for everything. It is a resource for various improvements that the community said they wanted and how the community can help themselves generate it. And it occurs along a spectrum from communities that are fairly simple on land use. It's mostly some houses surrounded by open space, all the way to communities that are wrestling with how to deal with industrial, commercial, housing, schools, and whatnot. So as I said before, we have tried to consolidate the community goals and policies into the policy plan so that we avoid that redundancy issue, we resolve some of the consistency issues, and we expand some of those policies to other areas. If you have, and Joshua Tree does, and other communities around here, if you have a 2007, Oak Hills 2013, if you have an existing community plan, what we've done is taken that community plan and taken all of the goals and policies, put it into a matrix, and then said, here is your goal or policy, and then here is what we're going to do with that. We either carried it over directly, more or less, or it's really better addressed in the development code. There were a lot of really detailed, action-oriented statements in the community plans that are really at the zoning level, not at a policy level. And so the development code is being updated, kind of trailing the countywide plan, but over the next couple of years. And staff here can talk to you about that. And in other cases, something was done. The demonstration garden was built, or a library was built, and in some of the cases, we're not carrying it forward. We either didn't hear it, the continued desire from the community, there was some other issue with it, or we just simply dropped it out. And then the last time I was out, especially I think out in Joshua Tree, there was a lot of people, some of you people might wonder, well, I wonder why we're calling them action guides now instead of just sticking with community plans. And we heard from a segment of the communities who said, hey, these things aren't the policy documents that we have right now. You should call them community plans. And we said, okay, that sounds good. And we went through about 5 or 6 different other names and said, you know what, they are more accurately communicated as action plans. We'll get those community goals and policies into the policy plan, and then have those action guides be more reflective of what they are. So, next steps. In a couple of months, we're going to release, the plan is to release the draft EIR. Obviously, if something happens or we get input during these regional meetings that causes us to have to delay this will change, but this is our plan right now. And the county does, all jurisdictions with an EIR have to release it for a minimum of 45 days. The county is choosing to extend it to 60 days for a public review period. And then we're targeting 2019, relatively early part, ideally, for the adoption hearing. So right now, we're trying to get your input on the policy plan, and then get your input on the draft EIR. So rather than dump 5,000 pages worth of content on you and say you've got 45 days to do it, we try to roll this out a couple of different times. And so how you can stay involved, we've got regional meetings this entire month. And so go ahead and review the policy plan, give us comments tonight, view the web maps, look at the action guides, and look for the release of the draft EIR. So with that, we're going to go into the question part, where again, we're going to have staff who hopefully been reviewing your questions. I'm going to feed me the questions, and either I or county staff will review. We're going to try and get through these as quickly as possible to allow people to then migrate as they want to ask other questions, but I know a lot of people want to hear these. So we'll just see how it goes. So Terry's to my left, and Brian Judd with Placeworks is going to read some of these.
Yeah, we got some really great, is this on? No. Is it on?
Nope. Oh, let's test it. Yep.
It is? All right, so we had, real quick, we received 14 cards, 15 cards, and we have and only 2 of them were somewhat duplicative, so all pretty unique questions, so we got something to cover, and I think we've got the people here to answer it. So first one up, probably Colin and Karen, are you changing, and I'm assuming this question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming this question applies specifically to Joshua Tree, but if I'm wrong, if it's more countywide, let me know. It just says, are you changing any zoning to higher density? So I'm assuming that's about Joshua Tree.
Yeah, for Joshua Tree, and strike me down if I'm wrong, and we have the maps, we can walk you through on the web maps, you can see for your own eyes. I believe we're only de-intensifying land uses in Joshua Tree. So there's some public ownership and conservation reflected in some of the downzonings. Other property owners were looking at it. Some areas where there's just not the infrastructure to support it.
That's true throughout the county, with the exception of a couple of the areas that you'll see on the growth projection boards where we have specific plans in place. But throughout Joshua Tree, Homestead Valley, all of Morongo area, the only land use changes have been less intense.
Next question, it's about community gardens. It's a multi-part question regarding the Joshua Tree Community Garden on the Parks and Recreation District facilities behind the tennis courts. The questions are, have you been made aware of the community's desire to establish a community garden in Joshua Tree? Have you seen the MOU yet? Do you feel a community garden would fit into our goals for Joshua Tree? And 3, how can we hasten the process of establishing the community garden? And I guess there's been some questions out there to the county, and they're kind of waiting for a response at this point.
Personally, I'm not aware of an MOU. Community garden is a great idea. I'm surprised that it didn't come up in the community action guide that we were putting together, but it doesn't have to be in that. So, yes, whoever put that question in, get in contact with me or Karen, and let's work on it together. It's a great idea, sure.
The county is also augmenting the action guides with a community development toolkit that if, let's say, something doesn't come out in the action guides, like a community garden, that there's going to be some, not generic, but just all-around general directions so that people can say, oh, I like that idea, but it's not in the action guide. Here's still some resources that you can get access to.
Okay, next question. Is there any attempt to connect the mobility focus areas, pedestrian areas, and pedestrian areas to encourage high desert wide cycling, walking, etc. between communities? Karen or Terry?
It was mentioned earlier about the bike lane that's just been finished, and that was made under the Active Transportation Program. It's a great example, and we'd love to see it everywhere. You have to start someplace, though.
Yes, and currently, the Morongo Basin Active Transportation Plan is in process. So whoever had that question, I can connect you with the person at the county and Public Works that's working directly on that. So please see me.
We do have a focus areas map that you can look at, and kind of central area of Joshua Tree, we've identified it as a mobility focus area, so some of the policies get direction on where to make public improvements. It's mostly in areas where you're going to have the most walkability, the commercial areas where you want people to be able to drive, park once, walk around, not congest the roads, and then how the surrounding neighborhoods can more easily get access to it without getting in their car.
Okay, the next question, it says the old community plan specifically said no big box stores or chain retail, yet the county approved the Dollar General. What does the new plan state, and how can we trust you'll listen to us and follow through?
If you look at the board in the back, this is something that came from the Community Action Guide. There's an area that is designated in the commercial zone to be, restricted for franchise stores. Not only big box, whatever that might mean, but any kind of a commercial franchise.
There's also a policy that goes along with it. I believe it might be 4.13 in the land use element, but it's around there. It's towards the end. So in the land use element, it talks about that commercial focus area, franchise restricted, and what it means.
And this is the only place. So we'll see how it works here. This is the only place that it's been proposed and represented. And so mainly, the policy that Colin referenced gives us the substantiation for it, because of the unique character of this community, because of the relationship to the national park, that it's just a special place and it needs to have a certain special character.
Is that throughout Joshua Tree or just that one commercial area?
Well, it's the commercial area, because if it's not a commercial area, you wouldn't be permitted.
It's a subset. It's a subset of the commercial district.
Okay, next one. I believe this is for Terry. What plans are in the works for use of the former elementary school in Joshua Tree? Could it be used for temporary housing?
I'm not aware of a plan for that school site. Temporary housing is something that it really is a good idea to evaluate what existing facilities we have that could be used. It's something that would require some cooperation because school sites are not under the jurisdiction of the county, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't work with the school district and the state representatives that would control the property. We have a couple of organizations in the county. Our Community Development and Housing Department works with the Countywide Housing Authority and with all the other jurisdictions, including some of the cities in the county. There is a homeless coalition, which is a consortium of agencies that try to work together. So yes, if it is a desire within the community, it would take some coordination, but it's absolutely a good idea.
Okay, next question. This is kind of a planning 101 kind of question. So Colin, I'm going to hand this one over to you and I can jump in or anybody else here at the table. So the question is, according to the comment followed by a question, according to the state general plan guidelines, community plans, when accepted into the general plan, have the force of law behind the community policies and goals. The 2007 community plan had the form of the general plan, or I'm not sure I quite understand that, but the community plan is no longer in the 2007 format. That's true. The goals and policies are incorporated into the new policy plan, but they are more general and not specific to a community. How will this policy plan support the community if it is in conflict? I'm not sure what, but and ends up potentially with a CEQA lawsuit.
I don't think there is a basis for a CEQA lawsuit on anything that we're proposing. I think that the issue, if I can maybe frame it as how I've been hearing the discussion. So the county has, during the 2007 general plan process, the 14, well, really 13 at the time, community plans were, I believe, adopted along with the general plan, and they were given the same level of authority. And the new policy plan tries to consolidate those goals and policy, and it's correctly stated, and it doesn't have the nitty-gritty detail that a lot of policies had in the 2007 or 2013 plans. That's an issue of a lot of the policies that are in the 2007 plans. They're more actions that ask for something to be improved at a specific location, or ask for a very specific restriction in a specific area. And that is what led to, there are some consistency issues across the county. There are just an avalanche of policies that somebody would need to go through. And so what we try to do is provide some policies that would have effectively, or the same effect, and perhaps be a bit stronger and broader so that those issues aren't just isolated to a certain area. Now, the policies that didn't make it through or got into more general cases, what we do want to hear is areas where you said, look, this is just not gonna work for us. We don't understand why it's not specific enough. Let's find a place for it. Maybe it's in the implementation plan, maybe it's in the action guide, maybe we do need to update the policy. So that's one of the reasons why we're coming out here. But we did try to streamline as much as possible. I think a number of the policies are actually going to be stronger than some of the wording that are in the 2007 plans. Others, they're just going to lack the geographic detail. But we still think that the meat is there, but we want to hear from you.
Colin, you want to elaborate on the matrix that's available?
Yeah, so just to reemphasize, we have a matrix. If you have a 2007 or 2013 community plan, we've gone through, they range from 20 pages to 60 pages. I think Joshua Tree might have been the winner. And so we went through every goal and policy and said, what are we doing with this? What is going to be the policy plan, policy or goal? Or is this something that might be in the implementation plan? Or is this something that's covered by the action guide? Or is this something that it's either done or it's no longer considered a priority?
And those are on the back table.
Yeah. And we have, if you go to your community planning page, we have that matrix up there, and I was thinking of showing it, just so you know. Okay, so if you go to the community planning page, and let's just go to Joshua Tree. And so you go to this first link here, or you can go into the What's New, and it says Draft Community Plan Action Guide, and you click on that link, and it will take you to a page where you can view the action guide, and we have here, let me blow this up here. There we go. Okay. You can view the latest draft, that 2018 in bold. You can see the original version that was released in October. And then you see here it says Community Plan Policy Matrix. So you click on that, and you'll get that PDF document that you can read through, print, highlight, copy, ask questions. We tried to make it so that it was as comprehensive as possible. So it is a bit lengthy because if in one community plan policy from 2007, the answer is three policies from the land use element, and then a second policy, this answer was the same. Rather than just saying see above, we just gave you the same information. So hopefully that way you don't have to keep flipping back and forth and saying, well, you guys aren't going to be able to remember. I could barely remember it. So that's really, I did it for my sanity more than anything else. But I think it's going to be a more useful tool for everyone.
Okay, next question. There's two separate questions here on this card. So the first one, is this a prototype plan, or are there other counties using this model?
Well, there's a number of ways to interpret that as to whether or not you're trying to ask of whether or not other counties are trying to look at the regional services issue. And I think in that sense, this is probably the only county in California. And we did a fair amount of research. It doesn't mean it's not out there, but we couldn't really find another example outside of California that tried to do it. Some of them said they did it, and then you look at the policies and you see that they're not really trying to address the regional services issue. But so in that sense, I think this is, I don't know if, well, I guess it could be great to be a prototype. I think it's a first stab at trying to overlap the responsibilities of the county and make sure that they get considered into the entire county organization in long-term planning. If this is talking about, I think the only other interpretation I could have is whether or not the consolidation of community plan policies into the policy plan. I think that's just a choice we're making here. I don't necessarily think it's a prototype. That's up to each jurisdiction.
And it's somewhat related to just the overall web-based format.
Yes, that's why it's good to have more than one person here for the brain duds like that. For a web-based plan, we have been, we worked with it in the city of Ontario, the city of Menifee, Clovis, where it was a web-based plan, so the content was not limited to a PDF or a hard copy. This is the first effort that we know of where it's really going to be indexed and searchable so that you cross-reference policies essentially and cross-reference information. And in that sense, we do hope that that's a prototype because otherwise these documents end up just getting occasionally referenced and used and forgotten. And so if we make them easier to access and use in arguments and decisions, then we do hope that this continues to pave the way.
So a way of thinking of it is if you have a particular issue that's really important to you, you're able to search for that and then find all the content in the plan quickly rather than having to rifle through, hundreds of pages of documents like other general plans. So. Okay, second part. What happened to the and I'm not sure I understand this, Karen, perhaps you do. What happened to the previous consultant firm and its community data?
That could be the dud.
Michael Baker International was hired to do the community action guides. And that was a 2-year project, and they completed that. So the county took on reviewing all of your comments on the, from a year ago, and then making changes to the community action guides, as well as the county has drafted 8 of the fundamental community action guides, which are just coming out this week. So, yeah, and we have all of their data. So they don't have anything we don't have.
Okay. What native plant protection during building will be in place? Too many developers are stripping whole parcels, not just the building envelope.
And this is not changing with the countywide plan, we have a desert plant protection ordinance in place. If you see land clearing going on that appears to be in violation, you can call our county code enforcement, and please do. And I'll tell you what, I think it would be a good idea, and I would like for the county to participate in it, but even locally, public education is the first step. I think a lot of times it's just ignorance of the importance of the plants. It's ignorance of what happens when you scrape the desert soil, and people don't realize until it's too late what happens. So informing people first is a first step, but do call us and we will come out and enforce. And I'm sorry if it's not sometime soon enough, but we will respond to you.
Is that, when someone wants to build on a piece of property, is it included that there is a plant ordinance, that you can't just go and blade and grade and?
So what happens, and the question is, do you give a permit and do people understand that? They're required in submitting for a permit to tell us if plants are being removed. It's not always done correctly. And yes, we try to give information out to people, especially if there's ever an inspection at the site and our inspectors notice that it appears that people are starting to clear plants that are protected. Yes, we do stop them at that point.
Okay, next question. Does the implementation of community action guides impact the ability to seek legal redress through CEQA for a project that might be inappropriately or incorrectly entitled by the county in reference to the Alto?
Your mic is off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's on.
I can tell where that question is going, and of course, adoption of a plan does not affect state law, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. It's always there.
Okay, and this isn't really a question for the planning work that we're doing, but I think it's a question that hopefully someone on the panel can answer. It says, why was a gas station next to the, why a gas station next to the library? Why a gas station next to residences? Why repair shops next to the library? It's in this, I don't know if they're answering their own question here. It says it is in the zoning in the general commercial.
To me, that sounds like a land use compatibility comment. One of the things that we are updating and I think improving in the countywide plan in our land use policies is to better address land use compatibility. So please do look there. How it happened by accident of certain things being next to each other that are there now, probably whatever it is was permitted in that zone, and most likely a commercial zone.
Okay, next question. Here, this is the one that we had 2 comment cards. It's regarding the TOT taxes. It says Joshua Tree is one of the biggest contributors to the TOT, Transit Occupancy Tax Fund. Why can't the money be used to implement some of the projects and policies in the Community Action Guide for Joshua Tree? And then the second part, I think, was more specific to road improvements.
Not sure about the road improvement part, but the question is, there's a lot of transient occupancy tax generated in this community in particular because of the tourism attractions. And why can't that money be put to good use in the community?
And I think that the answer is, of course it can. And whatever is, how the county uses whatever revenue is collected is part of the Board of Supervisors budgeting decisions that they make. But I do know that transient occupancy tax, there is a priority to put it back to work in tourism development and enhancements. And so, whoever is interested in, hey, how is the tax money being spent in this area, be in touch with our Economic Development Agency folks, especially the tourism development team.
Okay. Just a few more. Pioneer Town is currently in the early stages of pursuing National Register Historic District designation for Main Street. How does that process impact the revision of the countywide plan for that area? Karen?
Yes, I've been in touch with some people that are doing that, and it doesn't really affect the plan right now. They're going for status. If they get status, we may choose to put like a historic overlay on top of that. And then what it does is it provides restrictions for the specific historic structures that are identified in that. So those would be federal restrictions that are on there, and then you'd still have to meet any of the county standards and regulations. So it doesn't really affect it. We'll work together if you have that.
And so it's mostly to protect that historic quality and character, and at the same time, we can use more flexible building codes to preserve that as well.
Okay, two more cards. This first one has 3 questions on it. I think they're pretty direct. How will community action guides be used for future land use decisions? We'll just take one at a time here.
Talk a little bit louder.
How will the, there we go. How will the community action guides be used for future land use decisions?
Well, the community action guides set priorities of proposed actions within the community. Sometimes they may entail a land use change or a land use decision, but not always.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that, and I'm sure Colin can too. But for the most part, the policy plan is what's going to address those land use decisions. So those policies that were in the 2007 plan that Colin talked about, and how many of those were incorporated directly or retooled into the policy plan, those are going to be the ones that by and large guide those land use decisions. And so I would look at that matrix that Colin was talking about before to see how those policies will be carried forward into the policy plan. Okay. All right. What is the difference between resource conservation in the open space land use category and the resource land management category?
So this is when I was referring to that the county has a one map system right now, and that's general plan and zoning are the same. So that the zoning is being retained, and the zoning category is resource conservation. When you say, well, what is the equivalent general plan, or what we're calling a policy plan land use category, resource land management is what we are renaming it. Both to avoid confusion. If you have a two map system, you should generally use 2 different terms so people know what you're talking about, in addition to a more accurate depiction of what that category is meant. The other policy plan category that resource conservation is equivalent to is open space. And open space is areas where we know that it is preserved or dedicated exclusively for open space, either biological resources, views, or other activities. So the resource conservation will remain the zoning district, and the equivalent or policy plan category is either resource land management, which is largely the same as what you would understand resource conservation to be, or we really expanded that open space category. And that's the biggest change. Again, you'll see this big dark green expansion over the county that used to be this kind of lighter green resource conservation of everything that wasn't conventional development was resource conservation. We've extracted out the areas dedicated really for open space.
Okay, and then the third question on this card, how will the county incorporate scenic highways and byways into land use planning?
So we do have county scenic routes. I don't know why I just turned airplane mode on. That's my mistake. County scenic routes and also reflect state, well, there's one state designated scenic highway, and there are a number of highways eligible as determined by Caltrans for state scenic highway designation. So what the county's done is it said it's looked at the 2007 scenic highway or scenic route designations and evaluated those, updated those, taken some areas out, especially in urban areas where the scenery is no longer being left valid, and then looked at those eligible state scenic highways and the state designated scenic highway and identified those for county scenic route designation as well. So much like the 2007 plan looks at county scenic routes and has a policy about what to do around county scenic routes, the 2019, the county policy plan also has in the natural resources, the resources and conservation section under natural resources, you'll see a scenic highway section, and it has policies specifically about the scenic highways. Let's see here. And I will show you now how you, let me zoom out a bit so you can see. There we go. So when you go to the plan and the policy plan, you'll see there is this web-based policy plan. And so that is, you can get to the PDF documents with this as well. It's just easier for me to navigate here. And if you go under natural resources, again, this is a beta site, so it doesn't have as much graphics as we might end up in the end. It doesn't have the search functionality, but you'll be able to come in here and see the scenic resources section and see the policies that apply. So this goes on top of the existing development code restrictions and provides that policy level direction. And then you can also see the scenic routes and highways map. If you click on that, you can go in here, and then there's this little bookmark feature here, and all of this is in the how-to video. Let's just zoom in Joshua Tree. And so you can see that Highway 62 is, there's a lot of information in here. Well, I'll get there in a second. Is a county scenic route and an eligible state scenic highway. Along here, that is the Joshua Tree National Park Gateway as a scenic route, but it is not an eligible state scenic highway. If we go to Lucerne Valley to get an easier depiction of 247, and then you can zoom out here to see things a little easier. There's a lot of base maps you can choose from. This is a topographic one, which makes sense. We're talking about scenic highways. That's why we chose it as base map. But if you wanted to go in here and change it to be easier to see the colors, you can. If you want to go back to topographic, you can do that. We have a couple of different options there. So you can see that 247 carries that county scenic route designation, and then it's also it is also a eligible state scenic highway.
And if that question is specific to Route 247, if and when it's designated a state highway, it would have a specific management plan that goes with it. And so it wouldn't be one size fits all, but it'll identify certain resources and how they should be protected.
You can see that once it does become, if it does become a state scenic highway, that we have given it a separate designation there, that green, that part of the roadway over there near Big Bear.
So that's part of Highway 38.
Yes, gosh, in my head I said that, but obviously not.
Okay, last question, and I saved it for last because it's an issue of statewide concern. We see it in a lot of the communities we work in across the state, but the question is specifically, how is the county addressing the growing homeless problem?
Well, I touched on that a minute ago, so I'd like to pick up where I left off. You may see on, well, either in the county or as a coalition of the consortium of homeless agencies, some coordinated efforts in declaring a housing crisis or a homelessness crisis, which is happening throughout the state. And it is a way to take advantage of whatever scarce funding sources there are to put toward sheltering the homeless, which could include some out-of-the-box thinking, utilizing structures that are not typically occupied for residents, to do things that are safe yet maybe a little bit unorthodox to get people sheltered, you know, because it is becoming somewhat of a crisis. And so when an idea comes up like, hey, we've got a vacant school that hasn't been used in a long time, that's absolutely one of the types of things that we should consider. Other things that are being done in certain areas are, you know, utilizing modular structures, maybe having communal bathing facilities and just some structures to sleep in, things that are, I don't want to say makeshift, but that don't take so long to get going, you know, that can address a need now, that don't involve new construction and as much cost. So utilizing existing facilities that aren't being put to any other use is really a top priority in that. So please stay tuned. We can put you in touch. Whoever's asking these questions, they're great questions. I'd like to put you in touch with our housing authority and the folks at the county Housing and Community Development Department that are actually working on these issues. Love to have local ideas and participants because that's definitely what it takes to address the issue.
There was one additional comment card that was submitted from High Desert Water District, and I don't know, it was the lady that we handed it to, but we do have questions regarding the wastewater treatment and disposal. So it looks like as part of your plan, you're discussing minimal parcel size, which would require new lots smaller than 1/2 acre to be served by a sewer system. We service some unincorporated areas of Yucca Valley, which would fall under this this plan. And we just need clarification as to what do you mean by new lots? Would these be lots that would be divided through the county? Are these new developed lots less than 1/2 acre? Can you please clarify that? And will there be any, in going forward with this plan, will the county provide any funding to help implement this?
I'm not sure about the last section about implementing what, but the policies that we have in place are basically in response to and to implement the local area management plan that's in place in compliance with state regulations for protecting water quality. And so your question is about minimum lot sizes to allow septic systems, but we definitely as a county are not taking the lead on deciding what that should be. Instead, we need to comply with the state regulations and come up with a plan for the Regional Water Quality Control Board review. And so that may change over time. It's definitely not something that we can put in stone today in terms of lot sizes. And it's something that currently in our rural areas of the county, most of our zones have much larger lot sizes, partly because they don't have services available. So in our rural living land use district, you have to have 2.5 acres.
But can you clarify the new lots smaller, that verbiage? Because that's the...
New lots smaller than 1/2 acre?
Yeah, it says new lots smaller than 1/2 acre.
I think it is your question whether or not what the question, what a new lot is. So if somebody has an existing lot of record, then that is an existing lot. If somebody goes to subdivide, then those would be new lots, and they would be subject to this.
So let's talk later and clarify what that means, but typically, that kind of verbiage means we wouldn't allow a subdivision to create a lot smaller than the minimum size where you could have a septic system, depending on what area you're in. In the Santa Ana region, it could be smaller than in some of the more rural areas.
Thank you.
And I just have comments. I don't have any more questions. If you want.
Is there anything being done to help mitigate light pollution or preserve our dark skies?
So the question was about steps towards mitigating light pollution and preserving night skies. And they can answer on the development code issue. I can tell you on the policy plan, we specifically have, I believe, multiple policies that talk about dark skies, and one of which is as it relates to the military, so helping to make sure that we understand they're a partner that also wants to preserve the night sky. But then in the land use element talks about context-sensitive development and the preservation of dark skies as a priority. So we do have policy direction in there to try and maintain that and improve it, and to have community or development consistent with that. And then in the development code, there are already some provisions about the night sky. And again, the county is going through an update effort, and so that's the opportunity for that specific direction to get refined.
Small question. On the hazard map 10, where you have mapped the environmental justice community, which is Daggett, Newberry Springs, all the other, including Daggett, Newberry Springs, are legacy communities, and there's no definition for what a legacy community is.
Yes, and that is a good jumping off point to say, we are going to be trying to put up a glossary to make some of these more understandable. We're just kind of ran into a time crunch, so we're going to look to do that this week. A legacy community, there are two laws. SB 1000 was the environmental justice law, and that's the one where you see the environmental justice focus areas. Legacy communities is actually an older law, Senate Bill 221, that what its intent was to make sure there aren't any communities that are established and older that are being left out of infrastructure and service planning just because they're in a sphere of influence that the city just don't want to annex, or they're in the unincorporated areas and they just don't rise to the level of service need, or the ability to efficiently and effectively serve them with existing services. And so SB 221 brought in legislation that says for legacy communities, and it's kind of a pretty poor definition that was in state law because they don't really do a good job of defining everything. So we worked with LAFCO, and there's a definition. Basically, a legacy community is something that is 50 years old, at least. And I'm looking at Michelle because...
Continuous population.
There we go. Yeah, so 50 years of continuous existence with a certain population level, and that threshold is not high. It's also not defined. So what we did was we looked at what makes sense, and LAFCO provides a definition of a group of homes in close proximity to each other. So if you have, that definition is big enough to drive a truck through in terms of the wide range of what it could be. So we looked at, it was relatively small. I think it was either 10 or 20 homes within a quarter mile or something like that.
Yeah, most jurisdictions are using 10 voters, but then that limits your scope. So we went with around 10 homes.
Yeah, so just to restate, so a lot of jurisdictions, when you look at others and they address this issue, they look at 10 registered voters, which, as you can imagine, is a much smaller grouping of people. And you might have areas where there's 20 homes and there's only 5 registered voters. And so we went with homes to understand that there's still people that live there, even if they don't vote. And so, or if they just aren't registered now, maybe they were registered before. So that's what those legacy communities are. It's to address that SB 221. And we will in the information bars. We're going to have a glossary coming up on here, and ideally on the website, when you have a term that we think needs defining, you'll be able to kind of click on it or hover over it. So hopefully you tell us. It'd be great if you can tell us, hey, what do these words mean? Because we have a 10 or 12 page glossary going right now, but we don't necessarily, a lot of us, it's forest for the trees. We might go, oh, everybody knows this by now, and nobody does. So tell us any terms you don't know, and we'll put it in the glossary.
So thank you for your patience and your attention. Don't go away, because we'd still like to talk and engage you. But please browse and look at the materials and ask us your questions. You can still leave us more comment cards and contact us as you review these materials online. We hope you will.
Thanks for coming.